I'm just curious how you're rationalizing the storyline that's coming out of the IRS today. Bigger refunds that are unfortunately being gobbled up in many cases at the gas station.
Yeah, I mean, the IRS is, first of all, happy tax day for those who celebrate. And this is an important day for America and for taxpayers. And yeah, this is the first tax day where we're really seeing the outcomes of the One Big Beautiful bill in terms of new deductions taxpayers can take. In terms of, as the president you had just say, overtime, no tax on tips, and it's resulting in a 10% increase in refunds. But to put that in perspective, the average refund last year was about $3,700, so that's about $300 per person, which is nothing to sneeze at. That is an important amount of money for a lot of people. But as you mentioned, there are other things going on in the economy that may make that 300 and change feel smaller today.
Well, and when we consider all of these new tax breaks, just the differences in law this tax season compared to the tax season prior, knowing the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just said that this season has gone smoothly for the IRS, just how complicated was this tax season to execute inside the Internal Revenue Service? Danny, you obviously have a more insightful view into this than most. How difficult it is to make these kind of adjustments when there were so many in the bill?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a perfect day, April 15th, to talk about the impact that the Trump budget and all the staff cuts that the IRS have had. And that is because if you file your taxes today and everything is done correctly, you get the right Social Security number in there, you have all the right forms, and you don't have a math error or some type of mistake, you are going to have a smooth filing season. And if you file electronically and you include direct deposit, most likely everything will go smoothly and you'll get your refund if it's owed within 21 days. But if you do something that is wrong, you make a mistake, you don't include a form, you trust AI in a way that you shouldn't, and we should talk about that because that's a big story right now, then there's a higher likelihood that your taxes will be set aside. And if your taxes are set aside and you don't go through that system in the fast track, well, because of the lower staffing levels at the IRS, you have a much longer road to hoe in terms of getting everything reconciled. It's going to be harder to get through to the IRS. The correspondences are taking longer. So yes, if things go smoothly, and that's why it's really important today not to panic, and if you're not ready, file an extension. And if you file an extension, don't forget, you can extend the filing deadline, but not your deadline to pay. But make sure everything gets done right, because if it's not right, and AI can contribute it to it not being right or being right, we should talk about that, then you may be in for a long wait on the phone or a long wait for a correspondence.
Well, we've certainly come a long way from the agenda at the Biden administration to add billions of dollars in resources and personnel at the IRS. Do fewer resources guarantee more tax cheaters getting away with it?
It can. I mean, look, there are different reasons why people play by the rules. They follow their civic responsibility. They're patriotic. There are other risks, for example, CEOs and corporations face with other types of audits if there's non-compliance in the system. But yes, if you signal to America that you're taking cops off the beat, you're removing the traffic, the speed traps on the highway, more people will tend to speed. And that's why it's important to signal to America today that it's not like all the speed traps are gone. And Mr. Bessent and others have announced that they are going to use AI behind the scenes to make up for the funding and staff cuts. And how that emerges and what tools that provides to the IRS to find you as a tax evader if you decide to not play by the rules, that we'll have to see and play out. But I wouldn't take the chance.
Well, so let's talk more about this AI issue, Danny, as you've raised it a few times. Do you see it as something that could actually be on net beneficial, especially to those filing, trying to figure out what can be a very complicated tax system, especially with the rules changing over the last year? Or is it actually something that could potentially be a major liability if you're trusting AI to do this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think the number one question I've gotten this tax season is it safe to use a ChatGPT, a Claude, a Gemini for tax advice or to do your taxes? And my answer is an emphatic no, it's not. If you're going to use an AI tool for your taxes, I have a couple of do's and a couple of don'ts. Do use a tool that is tax domain specific, a tool that has hired accountants and engineers to really study the tax laws, that is peer reviewing and testing the outputs against benchmarks to make sure that it is accurate. A company that is very clear about how they're going to use your information if you submit it. And if you have simple taxes, like you have one W-2, you're a wage earner, you're a working class American, is more likely that AI is ready today to deal with your complexity. But for example, if you're a business and you're seeking to claim the research and development credit or something complex like that, then AI is not ready for that. And in that situation, you should not be relying on an AI tool. So you really have to look at it as a spectrum from simple to complex. And the more simple you are, the more the AI is ready today. And then look at it as a spectrum from general AI to more specific AI. And I say it jokingly, but I mean it. If you're on an AI tool where in one chat you're making your vacation plans, and the other chat you opened up, you're planning a bathroom remodel, and in the third chat you're doing your taxes, you're on the wrong platform. Get off that platform, because that is not, this is high stakes. Getting tax advice and paying, it's just like medical. If you said, would you trust a general AI tool versus an AI tool that's been validated by doctors and peer reviewed and is, endorsed by the American Medical Association? Where am I going to get my medical advice? I'm going to go to the medical one. And it's not different in taxes in terms of there's an expertise that's required. And again, the more complex, the less likely that expertise is ready today with the AI.
I want to ask you about the impact, if you can qualify it in any way, Danny, of the president's immigration policy on tax returns.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of questions about what this might mean. When you served as commissioner, how willing were undocumented workers? Were they, as we hear reported, willing to file taxes? And are you worried about the potential chilling effect that ICE raids have had in this tax season?
Yeah, the issue, Joe, is how the IRS shares information with other federal agencies. And there's a part of the tax code that is very strict and telling the IRS when they can share information and when they can't. And what the Trump administration has said and announced and done is they said, we're going to share your taxpayer information with ICE for the purposes of immigration enforcement. Even though the law doesn't specify that, the Trump administration is pointing to a broader exception and other language that gives them the legal authority to do that. And here's where that becomes a problem. Because we have previously operated in a world in which we were telling undocumented immigrants that there's a safe harbor if you file your taxes. That if you're here without the right paperwork, but you're doing work, if you come to the IRS and pay your taxes, we will not share that information with ICE for the purposes of immigration enforcement. That was the trade-off to make sure that we weren't losing $1 billion in potential tax revenue by capturing these taxes. But by announcing that safe harbor is over, now if you come to the IRS to pay your taxes, you risk us sharing your information with ICE. Suddenly you are very disincentivized to come pay your taxes. So it's a policy trade-off. My big thing is if you're going to do something big like this and share information with ICE, it should really be explicit in statute, and you should go through Congress to get that type of authority.